Have you ever felt completely thrown off when someone disrespects you? We've all been there, whether it's a rude comment at work, a family member crossing boundaries, or even harsh criticism online. But what if the key to handling these uncomfortable moments could transform not just your reactions, but your entire outlook on life? In this video, we're diving into an unexpected story packed with wisdom from the ancient Stoics, providing practical strategies you can use today. Stick around to the end because the climax reveals a surprising twist that might forever change how you approach life's toughest interactions. And hey, if you enjoy powerful stories like this that help you grow stronger, smarter, and more resilient, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your support allows us to keep sharing life-changing insights every single week. Disrespect is among the most challenging social experiences we can face, often striking unexpectedly and carrying with it a heavy emotional toll. Regardless of culture, upbringing, or personal values, almost everyone has felt the sting of a dismissive comment or the burn of being overlooked. Sometimes disrespect arrives in the form of subtle condescension from a colleague. Other times, it might be delivered as outright hostility from a stranger. In our digitally interconnected society, disparaging remarks can appear not only in person, but also on online platforms, where the relative anonymity of the internet emboldens individuals to express negativity more freely. This environment has fueled an ever-growing need for practical methods to cope with disrespect, ensuring we protect both our mental health and sense of worth. Here, Stoicism offers a life philosophy that remains as relevant today as it was 2 millennia ago. In fact, the Stoics believe that external events, such as the words and actions of another, are not inherently harmful until we give them power through our own judgments. For them, the main question is not whether people will be rude or unfair, this much they accept it as part of life, but rather how we choose to respond. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, famously said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In the context of disrespect, this maxim encourages us to see that while we cannot force someone to be polite, we can control how we think about and react to any perceived slight. It might be tempting to read these lines and imagine that the Stoics prescribed simple indifference in the face of all insult. However, as you will see, this interpretation is far too narrow. Stoic practice includes a variety of principles that help us navigate social tensions, principles intended to preserve dignity, foster personal growth, and encourage empathy. These include maintaining composure, self-reflection, pausing and breathing, practicing empathy, focusing on virtue, accepting the uncontrollable, using humor, establishing boundaries, opting for forgiveness, and gaining perspective. While each of these ideas can be applied independently, they are most powerful when woven together. It is in the interplay of these concepts that we discover a holistic framework for addressing disrespect in a way that strengthens, rather than diminishes, our sense of self. In this expanded article, we will explore these 10 Stoic principles comprehensively, divided into 3 distinct parts so that each principle has the space to be understood thoroughly. Part 1 will address the most immediate reactions we might employ when disrespect occurs, principles centered on composure, introspection, and purposeful restraint. Part 2 moves us into deeper territory, examining how empathy, virtue, and acceptance can radically transform our approach to interpersonal conflict. Finally, Part 3 explores the concluding principles: boundaries, forgiveness, and a broadened perspective, showing how they tie all earlier steps together. By working through these principles in a step-by-step manner, you will see more than just philosophical concepts. You will see practical strategies ready to be tested in everyday life. Ultimately, dealing with disrespect, according to the Stoics, is not about becoming passive or allowing others to walk all over us. On the contrary, it is about recognizing where our genuine power lies, within our own mind, our own virtues, and our own capacity for self-governance. When you adopt this perspective, disrespect can no longer hold the same sway over your emotional well-being. Instead of succumbing to anger, shame, or resentment, you can harness each experience, no matter how unpleasant, as an opportunity for growth and self-acknowledge. As we set out on this journey, keep in mind that transformation of this sort requires practice, patience, and occasionally stumbling along the way, but by persisting, you will discover an inner stability that not only helps you handle disrespect, but also enriches every aspect of your life. Before we dive into the specific Stoic principles, it is helpful to highlight the foundational attitude that ties these techniques together. In Stoicism, the concept of rational detachment often takes center stage. Epictetus, once a slave who later became an influential Stoic teacher, focused heavily on the idea that our interpretations, not external events themselves, dictate whether we feel emotional turmoil. When an individual treats you poorly, their words or actions alone do not force you to be upset. Your own judgment of these events does. If we consistently blame others for our feelings of anger or sadness, we surrender the power over our emotional life to outside forces. Stoicism aims to reverse this dynamic, showing us that we are the ultimate gatekeepers of our responses. However, rational detachment does not mean becoming emotionally numb or refusing to care about injustices. Rather, it involves learning to pause, examine our knee-jerk reactions, and decide, through clear thinking, whether they are helpful or harmful. Suppose you are in a meeting at work and a colleague publicly questions your competence. Immediately, feelings of disrespect may surge. Traditionally, you might respond by snapping back defensively or harboring a long-term grudge. Stoic practice suggests a more self-possessed route. Take a mental step back and observe your emotional state with curiosity. Ask yourself whether your colleague's words reflect an actual shortcoming you can address or merely their own frustration. Perhaps this reflection reveals you genuinely need to improve in a specific area, an opportunity to grow, or maybe it shows you that the criticism is misplaced, reflecting more about the critic's issues than your own. In either case, you maintain authority over your own reaction. To be sure, this process of detachment requires repeated training of the mind, much like muscle training in physical exercise. The first few times you try to remain composed under disrespect, you may still feel the flush of anger or the desire to fight back. In some scenarios, standing up for yourself firmly but not violently is appropriate. Nevertheless, the consistent practice of rational examination will gradually diminish the tendency toward knee-jerk responses. Over time, this paves the way for what the Stoics call ataraxia, a state of serene calmness. Though achieving such tranquility may seem daunting, it is, according to the Stoics, a natural byproduct of learning to control what truly lies within our sphere of influence, our own mind, actions. In modern times, we might also consider the subtle forms of disrespect that occur on social media. A passing insult in the comment section or a dismissive reaction from a stranger on a forum can stir up strong negative emotions, even if it is from someone we have never met. It might sound trivial to be upset by the words of a total stranger, yet it is very common. Here again, Stoicism's emphasis on choice in emotional response is transformative. Why allow unknown individuals to dictate your mental state? You have the freedom to not invest your emotional energy in every harsh remark scrolling across your feed. While we can never wholly eradicate rude behavior from others, we can develop a reflex that filters and interprets these actions in a healthier, more empowering way. Finally, it is essential to note that the Stoic approach is grounded in practicality. These philosophers were not content to spin abstract theories without application. Rather, They believed in journaling, self-direction, reflection exercises, and moment-to-moment awareness. For instance, Marcus Aurelius meticulously recorded his private thoughts on self-improvement, thoughts that later became the famous work Meditations. By methodically examining one's inner world each day, an individual can remain vigilant against creeping negativity or self-sabotaging attitudes, reinforcing more resilient patterns of perception. This practical bent is precisely why Stoicism has resonated for centuries. It offers a pathway rather than simply a philosophical statement. With this foundation laid, we can now delve into the first 3 Stoic principles for handling disrespect, which will be covered in the remainder of Part 1. The journey to dealing with disrespect in a Stoic manner begins with maintaining composure. This principle serves as the frontline defense against the emotional rush that tends to accompany perceived insult. Marcus Aurelius crystallizes this wisdom in the statement, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Applying this maxim specifically to composure means recognizing that while you cannot prevent another person from speaking ill, you are fully in command of how you internalize or respond to their words. In practice, composure is the initial buffer between you and any provocation. To illustrate this, imagine a scenario where a friend or acquaintance ridicules an idea you proposed. Instead of immediately reacting with indignation or sarcastic rebuttals, the Stoic approach encourages a moment of quiet. You acknowledge that you feel slighted, your emotional state is real, but you do not let that emotion become the driver of your response. If maintaining this pause seems difficult, remember that composure is a skill refined through repetition. Similar to building physical endurance, every instance where you deliberately choose to pause rather than lash out becomes an exercise in strengthening your capacity for self-governance. One useful method to reinforce composure is by employing a mental anchor, a short phrase or image that helps you refocus. For instance, you might imagine yourself as a deep-rooted tree unshaken by passing storms, or you might repeat a phrase like, "I choose how to respond." This mental anchor can be especially beneficial in volatile environments, such as competitive workplaces or family gatherings rife with tension. While it will not eliminate the reality of disrespectful behavior, it will prevent your emotional equilibrium from being determined by others' conduct. A common misconception is that composure equates to submission. Skeptics might argue, if I remain calm, I'm letting them walk all over me. Stoicism refutes this idea by suggesting that true dignity arises from calm self-control, not from matching aggression with aggression. Maintaining composure does not preclude you from addressing the issue firmly afterward. In fact, you can speak with greater clarity and authority once you have calmed your emotional waters. It becomes easier to say, "I found your remark hurtful," or "let's talk about this differently," when you are not seething with anger. This also helps you assert boundaries effectively, a topic we will tackle more fully in Part 3. Lastly, composure is an integral building block for the subsequent principles. Without it, self-reflection becomes clouded by rage. Pausing and breathing turns into a challenge. Each of the strategies that follow relies on having at least a modicum of mental clarity, something that composure secures. By emphasizing composure as your initial stance, you proactively shape how the rest of the interaction will unfold. It's a subtle but profound shift. Instead of the disrespectful person dictating your emotional state, you decide it for yourself. Over time, this shift can radically alter your sense of empowerment in social situations. You move from being merely reactive to being intentionally responsive. Key differences that the Stoics believed could elevate ordinary people into exemplars of wisdom. Building on the foundation of composure, self-reflection is the second Stoic principle that helps you transform disrespect into a source of internal development. When someone disrespects you through a public slight, a casual dismissal, or a more overt insult, the immediate reaction often centers on what the other person did wrong. You might mentally catalog all the ways in which they are inconsiderate, or imagine what you could say to put them in their place. While such thoughts might be momentarily satisfying, they rarely guide you toward a deeper understanding of yourself or a productive resolution. The Stoics, however, propose flipping this script by looking inward. Marcus Aurelius articulated the importance of inner dialogue. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. In Stoicism, challenges and confrontations are viewed as opportunities to polish your character. Self-reflection in this context involves asking a series of pointed questions. Is there any truth in what they said? Could my actions have unintentionally triggered this disrespect? Am I upset because I feel my self-position threatened? Engaging in this line of inquiry does not absolve the other person of responsibility for their rude behavior, but it does illuminate whether any part of their critique has validity, or if you are particularly sensitive to certain topics. Practically, you might engage in self-reflection through journaling. Many Stoics, including Seneca, recommended writing as a method to distill thoughts and analyze emotional responses. After a confrontational day, record the disrespectful interaction step by step. Note how you felt and the assumptions you might have made. This process helps you see patterns in your reactions. Perhaps you become defensive when your intelligence is questioned, or you feel particularly hurt when you sense you are being excluded. Recognizing these patterns is crucial because it allows you to spot them more quickly in future interactions. Over time, you begin to respond more consciously, rather than letting old triggers run the show. Furthermore, self-reflection paves the way for a more compassionate stance toward both yourself and others. You may find that your anger stems from fear or insecurity. By addressing these underlying issues, you become less reactive when similar criticisms arise. On the flip side, understanding that people often lash out from their own emotional wounds might ignite empathy within you. This doesn't mean you condone their disrespect, but you can see it as a sign of their own unresolved struggles. Epictetus advised, "Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourself." In a sense, self-reflection guards against becoming too fixated on the external, like someone else's rude words, and instead redirects you toward improving your own mindset. One potential pitfall to watch out for here is excessive rumination, which can devolve into self-criticism rather than self-improvement. Stoic self-reflection should be purposeful. Identify the core issue, evaluate your role, and decide on a course for growth. Then, let it go. The aim is constructive insight, not self-flagellation. By focusing on what can be learned, you maintain a growth-oriented approach that aligns perfectly with the Stoic emphasis on using every life event, even negative ones, as a stepping stone to virtue. Under this principle, disrespect is no longer merely an unfortunate event. It becomes a catalyst for introspection and, ultimately, personal betterment. Having explored composure and self-reflection, we now arrive at a principle that is both deceptively simple and immensely powerful. Pause and breathe. While maintaining composure is a broad concept of staying calm, and self-reflection is the internal process of analyzing what happened, the act of consciously pausing and focusing on one's breath is the tangible practice that helps you apply both. In the swirl of a heated moment, your body undergoes physiological changes. Your heart rate speeds up, adrenaline levels spike, and you might experience tension in your muscles. These symptoms prime you for a fight or flight response, potentially leading you to say or do things you later regret. What Stoicism urges instead is a brief intermission between the stimulus, the disrespect, and your response. Epictetus famously observed that events themselves do not harm us. Rather, it is our judgment of these events that can. By pausing and taking a few deliberate breaths, you essentially create space for your higher reasoning to catch up. One practical technique is the 4-2-4 breath. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 2, and exhale for 4. Repeating this cycle 2 or 3 times can quickly reduce the intensity of your emotional surge, offering a clear vantage point from which to choose your next action. This momentary break is more than just a tool for self-restraint. It also opens the door to mindful awareness. As you inhale, become aware of the physical sensation of your chest expanding. As you exhale, sense the tension releasing. This grounding exercise channels your focus back to the present moment, preventing your mind from spiraling into imagined future scenarios or replaying past slights. Such mindfulness aligns perfectly with Stoic philosophy, which emphasizes living in the present and not letting your thoughts get hijacked by fears of what might happen or regrets about what has passed. Moreover, pausing and breathing is not limited to in-person interactions. It can be just as effective in digital realms. Suppose you receive a disrespectful email or comment. The reflex might be to type out a sharp, reactionary response. Instead, the Stoic approach would have you step away from the screen, take several deep breaths, and reevaluate both the situation and your emotional state. Perhaps after some controlled breathing, you decide to respond calmly or even wait to reply later. This discipline often prevents digital altercations from escalating into more extensive conflicts or emotional distress. Far from being a sign of weakness, the pause and breathe approach is a demonstration of emotional intelligence and strength. It shows that you refuse to be held hostage by external provocations. In fact, in a culture that often prizes swift and forceful reactions, the ability to take a contemplative pause can elevate your stature in the eyes of others. You convey calm, confidence, and self-mastery, all traits admired even by those who may initially scorn you. Stoicism teaches that by modeling this composed response, you become a living example of how restraint can contribute to a more rational and harmonious social environment. Finally, it is important to keep in mind that this principle, while straightforward, requires constant application. Pausing and breathing under stress is not something that will become second nature overnight. You may find that in particularly contentious situations, where the disrespect cuts deep, you forget to breathe, or your pause is too brief to halt the surge of frustration. Even then, Stoicism reminds you that progress is incremental. Each time you do manage to pause and breathe, you reinforce a healthier habit. Over weeks, months, and years, this habit forms part of the bedrock of your emotional resilience, ensuring that no disrespect, no matter how pointed, can wholly undermine your equanimity. Now that we have detailed the first 3 Stoic principles, maintain composure, self-reflection, and pause and breathe, it is valuable to see how they interrelate in real-world scenarios. Picture a situation where you are hosting a social gathering and a guest unexpectedly makes a snide remark about your home or your choice of decor. The comment, perhaps delivered with a smile that masks condescension, lands like a punch to the gut. Instead of bristling openly or rushing to defend yourself, you recall the first principle: maintain composure. You ground yourself in the knowledge that you control your inner state. You avoid an immediate outburst. Then, you engage in a quick self-reflection. Is there some partial truth to what they said, or are they simply trying to provoke me? Do I really care about their opinion? Or is my emotional response more about maintaining social status? By turning inward, you uncover the real cause of your discomfort. Maybe you feel insecure about hosting. At this juncture, you integrate the third principle: pause and breathe. You discreetly take a few breaths, which helps soothe the rush of embarrassment or anger welling up inside. A few seconds later, your mind is clearer. You might respond with a neutral comment, or maybe you change the subject gracefully. The disrespectful remark has been acknowledged, but your sense of self-worth remains intact. You have not ceded emotional control. This scenario encapsulates how these three principles function in concert. Composure is your baseline, self-reflection refines your internal understanding, and purposeful breathing grants you the physiological and psychological space to proceed rationally. Such moments can arise in a variety of settings: family gatherings, romantic relationships, or professional environments. In each case, the synergy of these principles prevents a cascade of hostility. Even if the other person persists in their rude behavior, your measured approach keeps you from matching negativity with negativity. Over time, this steadiness can shift the tone of interactions. People often realize that they cannot easily provoke or manipulate someone who practices composure and clear thinking. For certain individuals, this realization prompts them to adopt a more respectful manner. For others, it may spur frustration. Either way, you remain in control of your response. Another benefit of applying these three principles is the gradual development of emotional memory. The more you practice them, the easier they become to recall under stress. Eventually, you might reach a point where you instinctively breathe deeply the moment disrespect surfaces. You do not freeze or suppress your emotions, but you do place them in the broader context of your Stoic training. Repeated experiences confirm that you are capable of handling rudeness without sacrificing your inner peace. A self-fulfilling cycle of confidence building. This is the essence of Stoic resilience. Each minor victory in the face of disrespect fortifies your emotional core, making you less susceptible to future disruptions. Still, some might wonder if there is a risk of bottling up your emotions or never asserting yourself. Remember, Stoicism does not preach perpetual silence in the face of wrongdoing. You can and often should address harmful actions or words. The difference lies in how and when you choose to address them. Ideally, you do so after you have regained composure, not in the heat of anger. This shift transforms confrontation from a reactive, potentially destructive exchange into a more purposeful discussion about boundaries and respect. Thus, these first three principles set the stage for constructive action, rather than impulsive retaliation. They are the ground floor upon which the rest of Stoic strategies stand. This completes our exploration of the initial trifecta of Stoic strategies for handling disrespect. By practicing composure, self-reflection, and the pause and breathe technique, you lay a solid foundation that will support the more advanced principles covered in Part 2 and Part 3. With these basics in place, you are well equipped to begin transforming negative encounters into opportunities for growth. You have taken significant steps toward reclaiming agency over your emotional state, even in the face of provocation. In Part 2, we will delve into the next 4 Stoic principles: practicing empathy, focusing on virtue, accepting the uncontrollable, and utilizing humor. These strategies delve deeper into human connections and our broader perspective on life's unpredictable nature. Empathy will challenge you to see the shared humanity behind disrespectful actions. A focus on virtue will remind you of your core ethical framework, even when others disregard theirs. Learning to accept what you cannot control will lighten your emotional burden, allowing you to release resentments that weigh you down. Lastly, a healthy dose of humor can provide a welcome release valve, helping diffuse tension and remind you not to take every slight too personally. Throughout these discussions, keep in mind that Stoicism is not a static belief system. It is a dynamic practice. Your progress will depend on consistent application in everyday life. You might find some principles resonate more deeply than others at first, but each can be integrated. This adaptable quality has allowed Stoicism to endure for centuries, from the Roman Empire to the modern digital age. remaining as potent now as it was when Marcus Aurelius penned his reflections during moments of wartime and political strife. The formula for emotional resilience, cultivating inner peace, recognizing what we can and cannot control, and choosing wise responses, transcends cultural and historical boundaries. As you transition to Part 2, consider taking some time to reflect on where you stand with the first three principles. Perhaps you could try a week-long experiment where you identify moments of disrespect, no matter how small, and practice the trifecta of composure, self-reflection, and mindful breathing. Take brief notes or journal about the results. Pay attention to whether you notice a reduction in emotional volatility or a shift in how you perceive challenging social interactions. These observations will form a personal record of your Stoic journey, one that can inspire further development in the next phase. With that in mind, let us move forward into the next layer of Stoic wisdom, which continues to build upon and refine the core tools you have already gained. By the end of Part 2, you will have a richer toolkit to address disrespect, not just through your immediate conduct, but also through deeper insight into human motivation and ethical consistency. Only then can we arrive at Part 3, where boundaries, forgiveness, and perspective come together to finalize a holistic, enduring approach to life's many slights and provocations. In Part 1, we established a foundation with three core Stoic principles: maintaining composure, engaging in self-reflection, and pausing to breathe, that collectively function like armor against the immediate emotional impact of disrespect. Now, in Part 2, we shift our focus to four additional principles that will deepen your understanding of the human dimension behind disrespect and refine your methods for responding. These principles, practicing empathy, focusing on virtue, accepting the uncontrollable, and utilizing humor, help us navigate disrespect with an open heart, a firm ethical grounding, a sense of peace about what we cannot change, and the capacity to see life's absurdities in a less self-serious light. Let us begin by painting a broader picture of why these principles matter. Often when someone disrespects us, we instinctively view them as an adversary. This is especially true if the disrespect is deliberate or repeated, such as a coworker who continually undermines us or a family member who habitually makes sarcastic remarks. We may wonder, how can I possibly stay calm, let alone empathetic, when treated so poorly? Stoicism suggests that if we understand the nature of human fallibility, the emotional baggage people carry, and our own moral obligations, we open paths to calmer, more meaningful engagements. That said, empathy does not preclude us from setting boundaries or confronting harmful behavior. Rather, it reframes our perception so that we see others' disrespect as stemming from fear, ignorance, or personal pain rather than sheer malice. Similarly, focusing on virtue ensures we do not descend into pettiness or vindictiveness in our quest to rectify a situation. Accepting the uncontrollable helps us let go of resentments that arise from trying to change what is beyond our power. And finally, employing humor as a strategic tool can sometimes diffuse tension, lighten the mood, and reduce the emotional charge of an uncomfortable interaction. Together, these principles enlarge the scope of our Stoic toolkit beyond personal composure toward an engagement with the broader social and existential dimensions of conflict. When we combine the readiness gained from Part 1 with the insights in Part 2, we become better able to transform disrespect from a purely negative experience into an impetus for growth, understanding, and even improved relationships. It is a path that can seem unconventional in a world where direct confrontation or passive-aggressive avoidance are the norm. Yet, for those willing to experiment with these Stoic methods, the payoff is an increased sense of autonomy, serenity, and even the surprising possibility of reconciling with those who have wronged us. Throughout these next four principles, consider how each one complements the foundational skills already developed. You have learned to steady yourself in the face of insult. Now you will learn to widen your lens, to see the universal struggles that lead to disrespectful exchanges, and to maintain a steadfast moral compass. In this way, the emotional buffer you cultivated in Part 1 becomes a launching pad for deeper introspection, compassion, and wise decision-making. Let us proceed then to the first principle of Part 2, practicing empathy, to discover how it can reframe our outlook on those who offend us and, paradoxically, allow us to handle disrespect with greater courage and composure. Empathy in a Stoic context is about recognizing our shared human vulnerabilities rather than simply feeling sorry for someone. It is an invitation to stand momentarily in another person's shoes, even if they have acted disrespectfully. Epictetus said, "Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourselves," reminding us that other people's harsh words or cruel actions often stem from their own internal struggles that might be fear, unmet needs, social conditioning, or psychological trauma. When we perceive disrespect through the lens of empathy, we shift from asking, "How dare they treat me this way?" to, "What might be going on inside them that led to this behavior?" For instance, if a close friend lashes out unexpectedly, empathy might reveal they are under immense pressure at work, feeling unappreciated, or wrestling with personal issues. Their disrespect, while not justified, may be explained by their emotional upheaval. Recognizing this can help you avoid taking their words as a genuine reflection of their feelings toward you. Instead, you see their conduct as a manifestation of their distress. This knowledge does not mean you simply allow people to harm you. Rather, it tempers your emotional reaction, reducing anger and opening the door to more constructive dialogue. Of course, some forms of disrespect may seem so vicious or repeated that empathy appears nearly impossible. In such cases, Stoicism does not demand you become a martyr or endure abusive relationships. Boundaries remain essential. Nevertheless, even when you must distance yourself from a harmful individual, a degree of empathetic understanding can soothe the bitterness that might otherwise linger in your heart. It lets you move on without harboring corrosive anger. The choice to empathize becomes a self-care practice, as it fosters emotional well-being more effectively than perpetual resentment. Practically, you can strengthen empathy through a few simple exercises. One is to consider a list of plausible life pressures or challenges a disrespectful person might be facing. Ask yourself, could they be dealing with financial stress, health issues, a lack of healthy role models? Another exercise is to recall a time you acted rudely in the past. Then explore what mindset or circumstances drove you to do so. Often we do not see ourselves as inherently disrespectful people, yet we can recall moments when stress, fear, or confusion led us to speak harshly. This recollection can bridge the gap between your experience and that of someone currently acting out, helping you see their behavior in a wider, more human context. Empathy also works hand in hand with self-reflection from Part 1. In analyzing your own emotional triggers, you may discover parallels in others. When you notice these shared vulnerabilities, it becomes easier to respond calmly when someone offends you. This calmness does not imply condoning the disrespect, but it does position you to address it in a more level-headed manner. Instead of escalating tension, you may find ways to communicate your feelings or set limits that encourage mutual understanding. In the best scenarios, empathy can even transform confrontations into healing conversations. Although it will not guarantee a positive outcome every time, some individuals remain unresponsive to empathy, it will ensure your emotional state is grounded in compassion and clarity rather than hostility. The fifth principle, focus on virtue, underscores the significance of orienting your responses around your core ethical values, especially when dealing with disrespect. In classical Stoicism, the term virtue refers to excellence of character, typically broken down into four cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. Seneca once stated, "Virtue is nothing else than right reason," highlighting the idea that virtue emerges from rational reflection on what is morally right and beneficial for society and oneself. When confronted with disrespect, focusing on virtue means choosing actions and responses that align with your highest principles, even if the other person's conduct is far from virtuous. For example, if you value honesty and kindness, you might respond by calmly stating how their words or actions made you feel, rather than resorting to insults. If your core virtue is courage, you might decide to stand up for yourself or someone else who is being disrespected, yet you do so thoughtfully, not out of blind anger. By making virtue the guiding star, you ensure that your behavior is not dictated by external negativity, but by an internal moral compass. It is worth noting that focusing on virtue does not translate into weakness or passivity. Courage, after all, is one of the cardinal virtues. Sometimes the virtuous act is to confront the disrespect directly, particularly if it is harming others or enabling toxic dynamics. What distinguishes the Stoic approach from mere retaliation is the intention behind the confrontation. Instead of looking for revenge or a chance to belittle the offender, you are motivated by a desire to uphold justice, preserve dignity, or encourage healthier interactions. This distinction is subtle but transformative. It prevents you from succumbing to the same destructive impulses that led to the initial disrespect. On a practical level, you can make a habit of identifying your personal core virtues, those that resonate deeply with you. These might include compassion, fairness, resilience, or integrity. If you keep these values top of mind, perhaps by writing them down or reflecting on them each morning, they become a ready reference when conflict arises. In a heated moment, recalling your values can help you choose the path that aligns with who you aspire to be, rather than who your anger or ego tempts you to be. Over time, this consistency between your actions and your virtues cultivates a profound sense of self-respect that is largely immune to external slights. Furthermore, focusing on virtue can transform the experience of being disrespected into a lesson in humility. Sometimes our pride flares up most fiercely when we feel belittled or dismissed, because we tie our sense of worth to how others perceive us. Yet Stoicism reminds us that true worth is measured by how steadfastly we adhere to virtue, not by others' opinions. In this light, being disrespected can serve as an opportunity to practice patience, self-restraint, or courage. Instead of draining you, the event becomes a test that hones your ethical character. This shift in perspective can be powerful. Rather than feeling victimized, you may find yourself empowered by the chance to prove your commitment to what truly matters. Our sixth principle, accept the uncontrollable, tackles one of the most liberating and challenging ideas in Stoicism. Epictetus wrote, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." When it comes to disrespect, the notion of acceptance revolves around the understanding that others' opinions, words, and behaviors lie largely outside our direct sphere of influence. We cannot mandate someone to respect us, just as we cannot command the weather to change course, but we can and should command our responses. At first glance, this principle might seem like an invitation to tolerate disrespect passively. However, acceptance in Stoic terms is not the same as resignation. It does not mean welcoming mistreatment or refusing to protect yourself or others. Instead, it is about recognizing the limits of your control so that you do not expend emotional energy in futile attempts to change what you cannot. As a result, you can invest your energy where it truly matters, refining your own behavior, thought processes, and emotional well-being. Let's consider a practical example. Suppose you have a coworker who, despite your best efforts, remains consistently dismissive of your ideas. You can address the issue by speaking politely but firmly to them, or discussing it with a supervisor if it negatively affects your work. These steps are within your control. What is not within your control is forcing them to genuinely value your perspective or to alter their personality. If, after reasonable efforts, their disrespectful behavior persists, Stoicism would advise shifting your energy away from trying to fix them and focusing on how you can maintain composure, define boundaries, and protect your mental state. One technique to cultivate acceptance is the Stoic practice of negative visualization. You periodically imagine worst-case scenarios, like persistent disrespect, not to dwell on them, but to prepare your mind for the possibility that they might occur. By mentally rehearsing your response to disrespect or rejection, you reduce the emotional shock if and when it happens in real life. This mental exercise helps you face reality with less fear, because you acknowledge unpleasant outcomes without letting them paralyze you. Acceptance also ties closely to gratitude, a concept sometimes overshadowed by the misconception that Stoics are emotionless. In truth, many Stoic writings emphasize finding contentment in what you already have, including the personal qualities and relationships you do value. When you focus on the blessings in your life, be it supportive friends, fulfilling work, or even small daily comforts, a rude comment from a stranger or a snub from an acquaintance loses its power to derail your sense of well-being. You realize that no single act of disrespect can overshadow the broader tapestry of life if you choose not to let it. This shift in perspective underscores that acceptance is paradoxically a form of control, not over external events, but over yourself. When you accept that you cannot force someone's respect, you free yourself from the chain of constant frustration. This mental freedom allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than reflexively. You can keep your actions aligned with your virtues, as discussed in Principle 5, rather than being guided by an urgent, futile desire to dominate someone else's viewpoint. In this way, acceptance transforms from a passive stance into an active, liberating force that safeguards your peace of mind. The seventh principle, utilize humor, might initially appear to stand in contrast to the serious, disciplined reputation of Stoicism. However, figures like Seneca and Epictetus acknowledge the power of lightheartedness in easing tension and maintaining emotional balance. Seneca noted, "You have mastered yourself when you know how to deal with what you should not take seriously." In the realm of disrespect, a dose of humor, used wisely, can defuse a heated situation, or at least help you preserve your own equilibrium. To clarify, this principle does not suggest mocking the person who disrespects you, as that could escalate conflict. Instead, the goal is to apply humor to the situation itself. A well-chosen, mild jest or self-deprecating quip can signal that you are not willing to let the negativity dominate the moment. For example, if someone criticizes your approach in a somewhat insulting manner, you might respond with a light joke that acknowledges their point without capitulating to aggression. This can help both parties step back from the brink of hostility. At times, the humor might be entirely internal, more of a private mental trick than an outward remark. You can imagine the disrespectful person as a caricature of frustration, or visualize the entire encounter as a scene in a comedy of errors. This internal shift in perspective can lessen the emotional sting of the moment. When you see the absurdity in someone's overblown anger or ridicule, you can avoid taking their words as a definitive verdict on your. Laughing privately at the situation's absurdity is akin to shining a spotlight on a stage. Once illuminated, the shadows that seemed menacing often reveal themselves to be far less frightening. Still, there is a delicate balance when leveraging humor. You want to avoid sarcasm or ridicule that might escalate tensions or humiliate the person speaking to you, The Stoic aim is to diffuse, not to add fuel to the fire. A gentle wit can be disarming, biting mockery can be destructive. If you sense that humor might be misread, it is sometimes better to keep the levity to yourself and respond with measured calm instead. Discretion in how and when to use humor is part of the wisdom Stoicism encourages us to develop. An added benefit of humor is that it fosters emotional resilience over time. Laughter triggers the release of endorphins, a natural way to relieve stress. By consciously choosing to see the lighter side of life's mishaps and affronts, you avoid sinking into the mire of negativity that disrespect often breeds. Over the long run, a habit of gentle humor can serve as a protective buffer, allowing you to remain engaged with the world without becoming hardened by its difficulties. Naturally, there will be moments where humor is inappropriate, particularly in severe or abusive situations. In such cases, the priorities shift toward establishing boundaries and seeking support. However, for the more common everyday slights that can accumulate and drain our goodwill, a bit of laughter might be precisely what is needed to keep perspective and move forward unscathed. Thus, humor, when applied thoughtfully, aligns with the Stoic pursuit of mental clarity and emotional sovereignty in the face of social friction. Let us take a moment to see how practicing empathy, focusing on virtue, accepting the uncontrollable, and utilizing humor can work hand in hand. Imagine you are dealing with a neighbor who frequently makes sarcastic comments about your lifestyle choices. Perhaps they belittle the way you garden or the type of car you drive. Over time, their consistent stream of remarks wears on you. In the absence of Stoic principles, you might build resentment that eventually explodes into an argument or fosters an atmosphere of ongoing hostility. However, if you approach the situation with empathy, Principle 4, you ask yourself whether this neighbor might be struggling with personal issues, loneliness, or a need for attention. Rather than labeling them as inherently malicious, you see their sarcasm as a symptom of deeper dissatisfaction. Coupled with focusing on virtue, Principle 5, you remind yourself that your moral code includes kindness and honesty. This leads you to address the issue firmly yet respectfully. You might kindly let them know their remarks are hurtful, upholding justice, one of the Stoic virtues, without descending into verbal sparring. When you accept the uncontrollable, Principle 6, you recognize that you cannot make them transform their personality. You can set boundaries and communicate feelings, but your neighbor's response is ultimately outside your domain. This clarity allows you to let go of the frustration that comes from wanting to fix someone else's behavior. Finally, you weave in humor, Principle 7, as a buffer. Perhaps you offer a light-hearted comment about your gardening mishaps, or gently poke fun at your own quirks, showcasing that you are not overly fragile or defensive. This approach might lead to the neighbor softening their stance, or it might not. But in either case, you have preserved your inner peace. This synergy of principles reveals how Stoic practice is less a sequence of isolated steps and more a holistic mindset. Each principle reinforces the others, creating a comprehensive framework for handling disrespect without losing sight of who you are. From a psychological standpoint, employing empathy can reduce anger, focusing on virtue can anchor your responses, acceptance can diminish futile agitation, and humor can lighten the emotional load. The result is an approach to conflict that leaves room for resolution but does not hinge on it. You remain grounded, regardless of whether the other person changes. Moreover, these strategies are not confined to everyday disputes. They can be adapted for more serious conflicts, such as workplace harassment or long-standing family feuds, although you would need to adjust their intensity and timing. In higher-stakes scenarios, it might be necessary to involve mediators, counselors, or official channels. But even in those settings, a Stoic perspective can offer inner stability and clarity. By choosing empathy over spite, virtue over impulsiveness, acceptance over resistance, and humor over gloom, you maintain a level of composure that supports constructive problem-solving and personal well-being. In this manner, Part 2's principles reinforce the foundational skills from Part 1, culminating in a dynamic set of responses to life's unpleasantries. You have the inner readiness from the first three principles: composure, self-reflection, and pausing to breathe, plus the expanded social and ethical lens provided by empathy, virtue, acceptance, and humor. The next step is to integrate all of these with the final three principles in Part 3, which will concentrate on setting boundaries, opting for forgiveness, and gaining a wider perspective. As you prepare to engage with Part 3, consider reflecting on how the Part 2 principles resonate with your personal experiences. Which of these new principles do you find most challenging? Which one feels most natural to you? Taking stock of your reactions will prime you for the concluding insights on how to fully synthesize a Stoic approach to disrespect. We have now traversed 7 of the 10 Stoic principles that enable us to handle disrespect more effectively. By cultivating empathy, virtue, acceptance, and humor, you expand the repertoire of responses available to you, moving beyond simple reactivity into deeper understanding and intentionality. These principles deepen the platform built in Part 1, allowing you to see how your personal stance can be shaped not just by internal stability, but also by a nuanced comprehension of human frailty and ethical ideals. Yet no matter how empathetic or virtuous we strive to be, practical reality sometimes demands clear limits, hence the importance of establishing boundaries. Moreover, unresolved grievances can weigh on our minds, making forgiveness a transformative tool, although it may be one of the hardest to exercise. And finally, stepping back to see the bigger picture can reduce the significance of what felt like a monumental affront in the moment. This is where the principle of gaining perspective shines. Part 3 will guide us through these final 3 pillars, tying together the entire Stoic tapestry. As you transition to Part 3, you may wish to consider any scenarios in your life where empathy, virtue, acceptance, or humor could shift the tone of your interactions. Are there any relationships weighed down by minor but recurring conflicts? Could a dash of humor or a measured dose of empathy provide a path to reconnection or at least mutual tolerance? Reflecting on these questions primes you to appreciate the final set of Stoic strategies, which will complete your understanding of how to respond to disrespect with wisdom, composure, and even grace. Ultimately, the power of these Stoic principles lies in their integration. Practicing them sporadically or in isolation may provide some benefit, but the transformative potential emerges when they become habitual, guiding how you interpret events and how you conduct yourself on a daily basis. So prepare now for the concluding lessons in Part 3, where you will learn to establish boundaries with calm resolve, embrace the liberating act of forgiveness, and expand your perspective so that disrespect becomes an increasingly small note in the grand symphony of your life. Welcome to Part 3, where we explore the final 3 Stoic principles that round out our framework for handling disrespect: establishing boundaries, opting for forgiveness, and gaining perspective. By this point, you have learned how to steady your emotional state, Part 1, and engage with a more empathetic, ethically grounded approach, Part 2. The remaining principles delve into crucial interpersonal and existential insights, demonstrating how Stoicism can help you negotiate conflict in a balanced way without losing yourself in the process. Why these last 3 principles? Boundaries are an essential concept in any philosophy of interpersonal relations. While Stoicism often emphasizes mastering one's own mind, it also acknowledges that living peaceably requires clear communication about what is and is not acceptable. In other words, Empathy and acceptance should not translate into indefinite tolerance of harmful behavior. Forgiveness takes us beyond boundary setting into the profound act of letting go, releasing the emotional chains that tie us to past grievances. Although forgiveness can be deeply challenging, it is integral to sustaining inner tranquility and preventing the slow poison of resentment from corroding our well-being. Lastly, perspective invites you to widen your mental lens. Life's adversities, including disrespect, often loom large in the heat of the moment. Expanding your vantage point can reduce their perceived magnitude and remind you that your sense of worth, or your capacity for joy, need not be defined by a single instance, or even multiple instances, of mistreatment. As we proceed, keep in mind that each of these principles does not stand alone. They are interwoven into the Stoic tapestry we have been weaving since Part 1. Composure, self-reflection, empathy, virtue, acceptance, and humor all support and enrich how you implement boundaries, exercise forgiveness, and cultivate perspective. When integrated, these techniques culminate in a holistic approach that enables you to face disrespect with resilience, wisdom, and an enduring sense of self. Whether your conflicts are relatively small, like a friend's occasional snide remark, or large and complex, like prolonged workplace bullying or strained familial ties, this final set of tools can be adapted to fit the scope of your reality. As always, Stoicism encourages practice. These principles are not magic words that automatically resolve tension. Rather, they are guidelines for how to think and act when tensions arise. By consistently applying them in your daily interactions, you gradually recondition your emotional reflexes and train your mind to meet adversity with balance and clarity. Let us begin by examining Principle 8. Establish boundaries, a skill that ensures your dignity and well-being remain intact, even amid challenging social dynamics. One might mistakenly believe that Stoic acceptance means acquiescing to all forms of disrespect. In reality, the Stoics consistently underscored the importance of justice and self-respect, which naturally encompass the concept of boundaries. A boundary is essentially a clear statement, through words or actions, of what you will and will not tolerate. It is not about controlling others. It is about providing a firm framework for your own conduct and well-being. When someone crosses that framework by mocking or belittling you, you uphold the boundary by calmly articulating that their behavior is unacceptable, or by taking the necessary steps to protect yourself. Setting boundaries can be a delicate art. On the one hand, you want to avoid a confrontational, aggressive stance. On the other, you cannot remain silent indefinitely when the disrespect is repetitive or particularly harmful. In many cases, a concise, direct response can suffice. For example, you might say, "I hear your perspective, but I find your tone disrespectful. Let's keep this discussion constructive." Such a statement does not belittle or attack the person, but it signals that you will not be a passive recipient of contempt. If the disrespect continues, the Stoic approach may entail removing yourself from the situation, escalating the matter to a relevant authority, if it's in a structured environment like work, or reducing contact with the individual to preserve your own peace. An often overlooked aspect of boundary setting is consistency. If you articulate a boundary once, but allow multiple violations afterward without follow-through, you inadvertently send mixed messages. You may have initially declared, "Do not speak to me this way," yet if the person persists in their disrespect and you remain engaged, your boundary loses its effectiveness. Stoicism teaches us to align our actions with our words. If you say you will leave the conversation if they continue, then you must do so when the boundary is disregarded. This consistency demonstrates self-respect and discourages others from testing your limits indefinitely. Additionally, boundaries can apply to internal behavior. You might decide, I will not let self-criticism run rampant in my mind when someone disrespects me, or I will not replay the same hurtful memory for hours. By creating boundaries with yourself, you avoid ruminating excessively on negative events, which can perpetuate anger or sadness long after the actual event has passed. Here, the line between disrespect from others and self-inflicted distress blurs, because how you treat yourself internally can be just as critical as how others treat you externally. Practicing mental boundaries ensures you do not become your own worst enemy by dwelling on insults or perceived slights. In the final analysis, boundaries serve as guardrails for your emotional health. They do not guarantee that people will always treat you kindly, but they do ensure you have a protocol for how to respond when they do not. By clarifying these guardrails for both yourself and others, you uphold the Stoic tenet of taking responsibility for your own mind and well-being. This principle harmonizes with the prior ones, particularly acceptance. You cannot control the offender's behavior, and virtue. You remain just in asserting your right to respectful interaction to form a robust shield against persistent or severe forms of disrespect. Forgiveness is a deeply transformative act in the Stoic toolbox, often misunderstood as either excusing bad behavior or belittling one's own hurt. In truth, Stoic forgiveness is more about releasing yourself from the emotional baggage of anger, resentment, or the desire for revenge. It does not necessarily entail reconciling with the person who disrespected you, nor does it mean pretending the incident never happened. Rather, it is an internal gesture, one that frees your mind from the corrosive effects of sustained bitterness. To illustrate, consider the perspective of someone who has been repeatedly mocked by a group of peers. Over time, they might accumulate a well of animosity, replaying the insults in their mind and wishing ill upon the offenders. This sustained resentment can become a heavy psychological burden, affecting not just their day-to-day interactions but their overall sense of well-being. Stoicism suggests examining whether carrying that anger truly serves any constructive purpose. Often it does not. The offenders may remain untroubled, while the aggrieved person's mental state deteriorates. By forgiving, you lift the burden from your own psyche, removing the emotional shackles that keep you tied to the offense. A practical step toward forgiveness is to revisit the concept of empathy, Principle 4. Try to comprehend as best you can what internal struggles or misguided beliefs might have led the disrespectful person to act in such a manner. Another helpful exercise is to weigh the cost of holding on to rage against the potential peace of releasing it. If you find that your grudge fosters continual stress, insomnia, or difficulty trusting others, it might be time to let that anger dissolve. This does not excuse the offender's actions, nor does it obligate you to maintain a relationship with them. It simply means you refuse to allow their wrongdoing to have ongoing power over your emotional life. Admittedly, some offenses run very deep. Issues like betrayal, abuse, or long-standing hostility may make forgiveness feel nearly impossible. Stoicism acknowledges that forgiveness in these cases can be a long, multi-stage process. You may need professional help such as therapy or counseling, and it may involve setting strict boundaries or even legal measures. However, if you approach forgiveness as an internal release rather than a complete exoneration or renewed closeness, you may find it more achievable. You can forgive someone, freeing your heart from bitterness, while still recognizing that their behavior was harmful and ensuring it does not recur. In the Stoic view, forgiveness aligns closely with personal freedom. Epictetus, once a slave, emphasized the importance of not being mentally enslaved by external forces. Harboring resentment effectively hands the keys of your internal world over to the person who caused you distress. Choosing forgiveness reclaims those keys. You become the master of your emotional domain, rather than allowing external events to dictate how you feel. While forgiveness may not change the past or rectify injustices, it can profoundly alter your emotional present and future, positioning you to engage with life more fully and authentically. We come now to the 10th and final principle: gain perspective. Marcus Aurelius famously wrote, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." In the realm of dealing with disrespect, perspective shapes our interpretation of events. Without perspective, a rude comment can feel like a calamity. With perspective, the same comment may be relegated to a minor footnote in a much larger life story. Gaining perspective is thus the culmination of Stoic thought, offering a bird's-eye view that prevents us from magnifying small slights into existential crises. One practical method for gaining perspective is the Stoic meditation on time and impermanence. Reflect on how fleeting our lives are in the grand scheme of history. Contemplate how many generations before you have lived, experienced insults, triumphs, joys, and losses, and then passed on. When viewed in this expansive timeline, a moment of disrespect from a coworker or a heated online exchange may shrink in importance. This does not trivialize your feelings, but it does help you maintain a balanced assessment of the event's true impact on your life's overall narrative. Another way to gain perspective is to compare your current challenge with other situations you have faced or that others face. If you have overcome serious illness or navigated the death of a loved one, a stranger's rude remark might pale in comparison. Likewise, reading or hearing about individuals who have survived significant tragedies can highlight that a moment of disrespect is neither the first nor the worst adversity anyone has ever faced. This comparison does not invalidate your hurt, but it can reframe it, showing that you have the resilience to endure greater challenges and the capacity to move forward despite lesser ones. Gaining perspective also intersects with self-reflection, Principle 2, and forgiveness, Principle 9, tying the Stoic journey together in a cohesive whole. When you step back to see the bigger picture, your ruminations about the insult or your desire for vengeance often diminish. A broad perspective makes it easier to forgive because you see how clinging to anger over one event could overshadow a multitude of life experiences that deserve your focus and appreciation. You recognize that your identity is far more than the sum of what others have said or done to you. Furthermore, perspective encourages humility. Sometimes we act as though the world revolves around our personal story, so an offense against us must be of the utmost significance. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly instructed himself to remember that he was but a small part of the universe. This cosmic viewpoint helps prevent us from spiraling into over-dramatization. We realize that while our feelings are valid, there is a vast tapestry of existence in which our momentary conflicts play a relatively small role. In practical terms, you can cultivate perspective by scheduling regular times for introspection, be it daily journaling or a weekly walk where you contemplate your life's priorities. During these sessions, ask yourself, how will I view this disrespectful incident in a month, a year, or a decade? Will it profoundly alter my path, or is it simply a fleeting annoyance? Most often you will find that the offense, no matter how hurtful, does not deserve the undue significance it might hold in the immediate aftermath. By continuing to practice these mental shifts, you anchor yourself in a wider understanding of time, personal growth, and cosmic scale. We have now covered all 10 Stoic principles for dealing with disrespect. Maintain composure, control your inner state, self-reflection, turn attention inward to understand triggers and motives. Pause and breathe. Provide a moment of clarity before responding. Practice empathy. See the shared humanity in those who offend you. Focus on virtue. Guide your actions by core ethical values. Accept the uncontrollable, release futile efforts to change what lies beyond your control. Utilize humor, lighten tense situations with mindful levity. Establish boundaries. Clearly define what treatment you will and will not accept. Opt for forgiveness. Liberate yourself from the burden of resentment. Gain perspective. Recognize life's bigger picture to prevent magnifying minor slights. When woven together, these principles create a robust framework that can handle a vast range of disrespectful encounters. Each principle has its own nuances, but they all align with the central Stoic thesis. True freedom and peace come from governing your own mind, not from expecting the world to conform to your preferences. Disrespect can and will appear, whether it arrives in the form of an offhand remark, a profound betrayal, or a barrage of online insults. The Stoic path teaches you to use each instance as an exercise in self-mastery. To fully integrate these principles, regular self-assessment is key. You can start by focusing on one principle at a time. Perhaps spend a week deepening your ability to pause and breathe under stress, then another week deliberately practicing empathy, and so on. Combining this gradual immersion with reflective journaling can reveal how each principle influences your interactions and emotional well-being. Over time, you will likely notice your default reactions shifting. You pause more frequently before responding. You find empathy more natural, or you see humor in situations that once angered you. While challenges will still arise, you may find they no longer destabilize you to the same degree. It is also vital to forgive yourself when you slip. No one transitions into perfect Stoic conduct overnight. Old habits, social pressures, and personal anxieties may cause you to react in ways you later regret. Instead of berating yourself, return to the principles. Assess what triggered the lapse. Then use that information to refine your practice. This iterative process exemplifies the Stoic belief in continuous self-improvement, shaping you into someone who not only endures life's slights, but grows stronger and wiser because of them. Ultimately, adopting Stoicism as a guide for handling disrespect is not about denying valid emotions like hurt or anger. Rather, it is about redefining the role those emotions play in your life. You learn to acknowledge them without letting them dictate your responses or overshadow your inherent worth. Respect from others is a desirable external good, but not one that the Stoics believed we could guarantee. Self-respect, in contrast, remains firmly within your sphere of influence. By mastering these 10 principles, you safeguard that self-respect, and by extension, your emotional and moral freedom. Having traversed all the principles, let us envision how they might apply in a comprehensive real-world scenario. Imagine you are the manager of a small team. One day, during a busy project deadline, a team member openly questions your leadership, delivering harsh criticism in front of everyone. The statement feels personal, disrespectful, and undermines your authority. Ordinarily, you might react with immediate indignation or subtle retaliation. Instead, you decide to apply the Stoic framework. First, you maintain composure, Principle 1, by taking a controlled breath. While doing so, you begin a process of self-reflection. Principle 2, why am I triggered so strongly? Is there merit in their criticism, or am I reacting purely from pride? You continue to pause and breathe. Principle 3, allowing a moment before responding. When you do speak, you incorporate empathy. Principle 4, I hear you're frustrated. Can you share more about what's bothering you? You remain mindful of your focus on virtue. Principle 5, striving for honesty and fairness rather than resorting to dismissiveness. As you listen, you acknowledge that some issues may be beyond your immediate control. Maybe resources are stretched thin due to company-wide decisions. You accept the uncontrollable. Principle 6, refusing to let it poison your attitude. A well-timed light remark reflects humor. Principle 7, possibly diffusing tension. I didn't realize my coffee choice in the morning had this big an effect on our workflow, but I guess it might. If the criticism persists in a disrespectful tone, you establish boundaries. Principle 8, but we should keep the tone respectful. Let's continue this discussion privately if needed. In the aftermath, you might still feel stung, yet you remember to opt for forgiveness. Principle 9, reminding yourself that the team member could be under stress. Holding a grudge would only hamper collaboration. Finally, you gain perspective, Principle 10, by recognizing that this incident, while unpleasant, is a small facet of your career. You recall past hurdles you have overcome and see this moment as a stepping stone for growth, not a defining catastrophe. The project moves forward, relationships, though tested, can be repaired, and you, as the manager, remain aligned with your core values rather than drifting into bitterness. In this single event, all the Stoic principles converge, creating a response that is measured, compassionate, firm, and forward-looking. This example underscores that Stoicism is not about passive submission or emotional repression. It is about choice. The choice to direct your thoughts and actions intentionally rather than haphazardly. Such deliberate living fosters a resilience that can weather many storms of disrespect, whether they arise in professional settings, personal relationships, or random encounters. We conclude our Stoic journey with a final reflection on the timeless and practical nature of these 10 principles. Disrespect, in all its forms, challenges our sense of security and dignity. Yet, as we have explored, the Stoic response is neither naive positivity nor harsh retaliation. Instead, it is a disciplined inner practice that aims to harness every difficult moment as an opportunity for self-acknowledge and growth. By maintaining composure, self-reflecting, pausing to breathe, practicing empathy, focusing on virtue, accepting what you cannot control, using humor, establishing boundaries, embracing forgiveness, and gaining perspective, you develop a mindset that not only shields you from the sting of disrespect, but also propels you toward a richer, more centered life. In today's world, where social media amplifies conflicts and online anonymity often erodes civility, these Stoic insights hold renewed relevance. The lines between personal and public can blur, and boundaries can feel harder to assert. All the more reason to keep these principles close. They remind us that our power lies in our judgments and responses, not in the fickle tides of public opinion or the unpredictable moods of strangers. By choosing to respond thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively, you do more than protect your own peace. You also contribute to a culture in which respect is modeled and valued. As you continue practicing, remember the essence of Stoicism. It is a path, not a final destination. You might revisit these principles repeatedly, sometimes faltering, sometimes finding new depths to their meaning. In the process, you become increasingly adept at transforming discord into clarity, disrespect into an occasion for wisdom, and emotional turmoil into purposeful action. Disrespect, then, loses its corrosive potential and instead becomes another piece of life's mosaic, shaping but never defining your character. Through Stoic cultivation, you emerge with a steadier heart and a mind equipped to navigate the complexities of interpersonal exchange. Thank you for accompanying this extensive exploration of how to handle disrespect through Stoic principles. May these insights guide you toward greater resilience, compassion, and self-mastery in all your interactions. Take from them what resonates, experiment in real-life settings, and adapt them to your unique circumstances. In doing so, you carry forward a philosophical tradition that has offered solace and strength to countless individuals across centuries, reminding each of us that the true seat of power lies in the realm of our own thoughts and choices. So, there it is, the powerful truth behind transforming disrespect into personal strength. From mastering your composure to learning the underrated power of empathy, these timeless principles have the potential to elevate your daily interactions and enrich your life. Personally, I've found that embracing these strategies doesn't just make conflicts easier. It actually makes relationships deeper and more meaningful. But now, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these principles spoke most clearly to your experience? Have you faced situations where applying these Stoic insights made all the difference? Drop your stories and thoughts in the comments below. Let's spark a meaningful conversation. And don't forget, if you're looking to level up your emotional intelligence, confidence, and resilience, make sure you subscribe. Together, we'll continue discovering powerful ways to live better, no matter what life throws our way.